So, if you're looking at the castle, this, like any ancient building, it wasn't parachuted in one day in 1597, which is when it dates from, in exactly the form that it sees now. And every old building, including kind of national icons like Edinburgh Castle or Westminster Abbey, have all grown and developed over the years. So, if we go back to 1597, Francis, the 9th Earl of Errol, has had to go into exile because the king disapproved of him leading a rebellion, a Catholic rebellion against the Protestant ascendancy. And the king blew up the castle that you've just come from at Old Slains. He came back 3 years later. The king allowed him back on the condition that he signed the Presbyterian Declaration of Faith, which he did in St Nicholas Kirk in Aberdeen in 1597. And he discovered that his castle down the coast was beyond saving. But he had a tower here called the Tower of Bowness, which he decided to turn into his new home. And he built a very grand L-plan tower. Delgaty, where you've all just come from, that is an L-plan castle. So it's two wings and joined together at a corner to form a letter L. But Francis's L-plan would have been much bigger than that. And
Can you explain the L-plan to people quickly?
So the L-plan, castles, when gunpowder first was introduced, that's when stone castles began, and they had a single tower, and the doorway was at first floor level, reached by a wooden staircase, which if they were attacked, they either had a mechanism that hoisted the staircase up to first floor level, or more likely they just set fire to it, they just burnt it. But that was a very inconvenient way of living, so they cottoned on to the idea of building two towers joined at a corner, because they could then move the door to the ground floor in what's called the reentrant angle, so the angle between the two towers. Because that could be defended, there would be crossfire from each of the two towers, the doorway could be seen and could be defended. That's why we ended up with L-plans. And some castles that have developed over the years, if you look at somewhere as grand as Glamis, which is where the late Queen Mother grew up, it looks absolutely palatial, and in fact it is. But if you look at it, right in the middle is a very big L-plan tower house, which is how it would have started off. So Francis kicks off with his L-plan house, more or less where that square tower is now. It would have been much higher. The tower was reduced in height when the 13th Earl put a new frontage on the building. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. So it began life in 1597 as an L-plan tower. Because we had very, very strong connections with France, in the 17th century, the fashion in France was for the courtyard palace. Four sides of a courtyard, four wings forming a courtyard in the middle. And that found its way into Scotland. A classic example of it still there is the main part of Holyrood Palace in Edinburgh, the King's Palace in Edinburgh. And that's what Francis's grandson, Gilbert, the 11th Earl, constructed in 1664, I think. So what he did is so if you imagine that we've got two wings of the L-plan just there, he extended one in that direction up the cliff, one across here, and then joined them up together by building two completely new wings to form four sides of a courtyard. In those days, you can see what is in front of us here with that arch. That is the front door. Did you go into Old Slains, the house?
No, we couldn't get in because I've gone.
Oh no, you've got to build it. No, I just wondered if they'd seen they haven't seen the armorial then, the armorial above the fireplace. Yeah. So there was a flight of stairs led up to where that grassy bit is. Granite steps, polished granite, which is now installed in a high school in Aberdeen. So the family and their guests, the castle was entered at first floor level, and virtually all of the family apartments or the staterooms were on the first floor. The ground floor pretty much dedicated to domestic offices, so kitchens, the servants' hall, the butler's pantry, the housekeeper's room, and so on and so forth. So when we walk round, bear in mind what we're talking about. When I talk about a particular, the drawing room, which was over there, think that you need to think about one floor up. It's not where we're standing, it's one floor above it. And that will be the case as we walk round it. When you look back to Gilbert, the 11th Earl's courtyard, try and imagine that all of that internal masonry in the middle of the structure doesn't exist, because it wasn't there. It was a simple courtyard. In 17th century fashion, and this is still the case on the main quadrangle at Holyrood, the rooms were accessed. You went through one room to get to another one, so the rooms were accessed through each other all the way round. That remained the case until the time of the 15th Earl, and the bedrooms, which were then on the ground floor, opened straight into the outdoors, into the outside courtyard, which in an Aberdeenshire winter must have been interesting. In the 15th Earl's time, he was the Earl from 1758 to 1778, so sometime in that period, he added a corridor on the inside of the courtyard, which meant that the bedrooms no longer opened into the open air, and also you didn't have to walk from one room to the next in order to travel around the place to get to where you wanted to be. So that's how the castle is in 1778. Scroll forward to 1836-37, the 18th Earl decides he's going to renovate the whole place. And the structure that he created was a very, very grand building indeed. And he's the one who added all the stuff in the middle. So the saloon, as it was called, not the salon, as you'll often read online, the saloon is an 8-sided room in the middle, which my good friend Mike Shepherd from down in the village here, who writes a lot about this area, believes firmly is the inspiration for Dracula's castle, Bram Stoker's Dracula, because he had an octagonal room in his castle.
With no windows?
With no windows. Well, it did have a window. It was lit from above by a huge circular skylight.
That's a lantern.
Well, there was a lantern hanging there.
No, but
yeah.
a lantern is actually...
A lantern is the skylight, right.
In a large stately home, the bit that sticks up...
So is that one at
windows
Woodbury a
called
lantern then? Is that because... Yeah.
Well, it's not really, it's a bit of dome, but...
Yeah.
Anyway, don't worry.
Yeah. So let's just walk around the building. If you're looking at, from what we're looking at here, you enter at the front door. On the left was what was latterly the billiard room. Remember, we're talking one floor up. On the left was what latterly became the billiard room, although I have seen older plans and older descriptions where it was used for something else. So it wasn't necessarily always the billiard room, but eventually that's what it became. On the right were all of the family bedrooms, and they were screened from the front door by stained glass partitions. The 19th Earl, who really spent all his time here, he liked to sleep in the room right at the top of the tower. That was his bedroom. And he was the last nobleman, as far as we know, to keep a professional fool. Remember, he died in 1891, so it's not that long ago, but he had a professional fool whose name was Sandy Cruikshank, who lived locally. And one of Sandy's jobs was to pump seawater from down there right up to fill the Earl's bath every day. He liked to bathe in seawater. So Sandy would be cranking his pump, but some of the maids thought it would be hilarious to pull the plug out and let him crank away into nothing. So he'd be pumping his water up, running up the stairs, think, oh God, it's still not full, back down the stairs and pumping it again. So, poor chap, he was no doubt kept very fit. So that's, and the 19th Earl is the one he was a great benefactor locally. He built the church, the Congregational Church at the foot of the main drive here in the village for his fishing community, which were Congregationalists. He built the harbour in Cruden Bay. Before that, they used to pull their fishing boats up onto the beach. And he had a reading room. He was very strict about the kind of reading material that was admitted to it. Wouldn't allow an alehouse on his property. The Kilmarnock Arms, when it was built, was a temperance hotel. It didn't serve anything alcoholic. So he died in 1891. His son, the 20th Earl, was the last Earl to own this place. In 1916, because what had happened in 1916, but by that time the First World War was taking its economic toll, especially on the old families, and there were the twin evils of taxation to pay for the war and inflation meant that he just couldn't afford to stay here. So he sold the castle to Sir John Ellerman, who was a Newcastle ship owner. I kind of hesitate to use the phrase asset stripper about Ellerman, because he actually did a great deal of good with his money. But his great skill was to buy something at rock bottom, his real skill was he could look at a balance sheet and tell you what was wrong. So he would put these things right. He bought the castle and he never even visited it, as I understand it. It's said that he never actually came here, but he bought it as an investment. When times were better, which was in 1922, he broke up the estate and sold it piecemeal. So the farms were sold mainly to the tenants, including my great-grandmother's brother, actually, who got his tenancy of West O'Heary's. The feud houses in the village were sold to the residents, mainly. The contents of the castle were auctioned. Anybody know Kinnaird Castle in Angus? See to the Duke of Fife. An awful lot of the stuff is there.
I know.
Because they were buying their own family stuff. Because Kinnaird Castle, which looks, if you look at it now, it looks as if it's been there for millennia. It's actually 100 years old. Because Kinnaird Castle in 1921 burnt to the ground. So they'd just built a brand new castle when Slains was being sold. The Countess of South Esk, as she then was, the owner's mother, was Lady Agnes Hay, daughter of the 18th Earl of Errol. So in some ways it made sense for them to try and furnish their new castle from here, because it was their own stuff they were buying. But I'd love to get in there, because it's so open to the public. What you'll pass on the right here is the wine cellar.
Which year do you want?
Because it's all gone.
Where's Nicky? Is that the way to the saloon? I think it is.
Nicky?
I think it is. Yeah, it
Nicky?
is.
Alan's got lost already.
Yeah, I've got.
No, he doesn't. He said, "Is that the way to?" Here, Nicky's. I've got Nicky for you.
Yeah, that's what I'm just trying to find the quickest way to it.
Yes, there it is.
Oh no, we can't. Right, we'll have to go over this then.
Do you want to go through here or the other? Follow Nicky. She knows what she's doing. While Alan clambers over the rocks. Yes.
Yeah. Nettles will be all right.
You see, we were sensible. We followed She Who Knows.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Our new scout.
It's lovely when you see the clouds moving over the top, isn't it? Like that.
I suppose yes, it is actually.
otherworldly.
No, really, it is, because they are moving. They would do in this wind,
What
wouldn't
would
they?
they have in this little room next to it here? Do you know?
That little room you've just come from wasn't a room; it was outside.
Okay.
So there are 3 outside courtyards, which would have been exterior. There were what is called an area. Is anybody familiar with the word area?
Yes.
Well, I know you are, but I mean so. If you're walking down one of the very grand streets in Edinburgh's New Town, and you'll have some steps going up to the front door, but you'll also have a flight of steps going down
Yes.
beyond
That's the
some
area.
railings to the basement. That is the area.
Yes.
So areas would have had bins and whatever
Well, they had
outside
windows out from the basement, so you
Yeah.
could get some light into them as well.
into them. Yeah. So these were areas. What we're standing in now, remember, first floor level. What we're standing in now is the room known as the saloon, the octagonal room. So when somebody came to visit the Earl, they'd come in through the front door. You can see the arch there, and they'd be escorted up the corridor and left in the saloon. And this is the place that was lit from above by the lantern.
The skylight. Yeah, skylight.
And so it was lit from above by that. And this is the place that Mike, the author, Mike Shepherd, is absolutely convinced was the inspiration for Dracula's octagonal room in his novel. Of course, he did write Dracula in Cruden Bay. You know, Bram Stoker holidayed here practically through the whole of the 1890s. I forget when he started and when he finished. And he chose to stay at lodge in a cottage in a place called Whinnyfold, which we call Funny Fowl, because no Aberdeenshire place name is pronounced the way it's written down. And he lodged with her when he came on holiday, and he did a great deal of his writing from here. So entirely possible that this was the inspiration for Dracula's Castle. But remember, Dracula's Castle in the book is a semi-ruinous wreck of a place, a great romantic Gothic ruin. Now you can see that, imagine that now, standing in this place. But the Slains Castle that Stoker knew wasn't a ruin. It was a very comfortable, well-appointed mansion.
Vampires don't exist either, so I think he might have used a little bit of poetic.
Maybe he might have used a bit of license. Yes, yeah, yeah. Who told you vampires don't exist?
Do you want to see the marks?
So here we're standing in the saloon from which everything else would have been accessed. Right, now what's the best way to go from here? I think if we go back the way we came, and 6 feet long, and they were lined on both sides, both corridors, with family portraits. So there were an awful lot of pictures back in those days, many of which have been sold on to people who could afford them. Yeah. Yeah.
Was this a sitting room?
So as we move up from the family bedrooms, the first room you come to is Lady Errol's sitting room, and what we're in now, I think, yes. So this room, remember we're talking about first floor level again. So we're standing in the smoking room, the ground floor level smoking room. Above us is the drawing room with this huge bay window looking straight out into the sea. It was a magnificent room. It measured 42 feet by 20. And beyond it, which we'll just go into in a minute, it was the library. The Library of Slains Castle was renowned in its day. Its nucleus was the library of Bishop Drummond of Brechin, who stayed here after 1690 when he was what became the Church of Scotland, the Presbyterian Church of Scotland, threw him out of his cathedral. He was a Drummond. The then Countess was a Drummond. It's a racing certainty that Bishop Drummond was some kind of connection of hers, but we can't really tell where he came from. She was a daughter of the Earl of Perth, sister of the famous Jacobite Duke of Perth, and she was a great intriguer in the Jacobite cause. She used to have Jacobite agents from France would land here because it was so secluded and nobody knew. So the library was, the nucleus of it was Bishop Drummond's library, which is it's in the Glasgow City Museum now. It was a good example of a 17th century clergyman's working library, but it was added to by the 15th Earl in the 1760s, 70s, who was a great book collector. Whether he read them was another matter, but what he liked to do was collect them. He was a great collector. And the other one that added to it was the 14th Countess of Errol in her own right, also a great Jacobite. She married a man called Alexander Faulkner, who in the tradition of the time, when somebody married an heiress with a grander title than his, he took her name, so he became Alexander Hay of Delgaty. And he was a great bibliophile too. So the Slains Castle Library was really something very, very special. But of course, what usually happens when money starts to run short is the first things that are sold in country houses are books. Because if you sell land, you're selling your income. If you sell furniture, people notice. If you sell pictures, they notice. But with books, all you have to do is fill the shelves with something cheaper. So the books were, I mean, for example, just over the hill here at Haddow House, the seat of the Marquess of Aberdeen, there were 2 very big book sales there in the 1920s. So books tend to go. And, what we're getting into now is the kind of business end of the operation, because one of the things that William George did to make the house look much grander than it actually is he built the stable block into the house. So we've got a bakery here. Next door there was a slaughterhouse, there was a brewery, and there were various workshops. There was a carpenter's shop, there was a smithy, and a saddler's shop. They're all within the castle precincts, so within the stable block. And the 20th Earl, the last one who lived in, who sold it in 1916, was a very, very gifted craftsman, and he ran classes, woodwork classes, for people from the estate in the carpenter's shop here. You know that? Yeah, he was very talented.
No idea at all.
Yeah. So if we make our way out this way, and what we've got is the stables all around. Countess Eliza Gore, the wife of the 19th Earl, we know quite a lot about it because of the description. She was very close to her father, and who was in Canada, and she wrote to him a lot. Descriptions of this place. We know that from Countess Eliza that there was stabling for 24 horses here, and the grooms, of course, lived in the above in the apartments above the stables. I was just going to quote Colin, because the gardens here were really extensive, and John's just pointed out that it looks as that was probably terraced at some point. But Colin told me, Colin is Nicky's husband, is that when he ploughs that field there, he can tell where the garden walls were. Yeah. So there's still down this range here. We've got most of the main domestic offices in here. If you look at the old photographs of the castle when it was intact, there's what looks like just an ordinary double-fronted house built in there. Doorway in the middle, window either side, 3 windows across the top. That was the servants' entrance, and that led here to the kitchen, to the servants' hall, housekeeper's room. All of the main domestic offices are in this range here, between that round tower and the stable yard. And then beyond it, you've got servants' bedrooms on the ground floor here, and at first floor level, working from the front of the castle towards us, night nursery, day nursery and schoolroom on the first floor. And that's about it. Have I missed anything?
I think so.
Yeah.